Tokenize, let's innovate, bringing answers to the digital state. From finance to games, we're redefining, connecting the dots, the future is shining.
So, yes, it's with my privilege and honor to introduce the former IRS Commissioner, Chuck Rettig. He is Commissioner number 49. He spent 36 years working for a law firm specializing in tax controversy, helping clients out with those types of issues. And so he's here today to talk to us about client compliance and giving us some insight in the inner workings and things that you probably don't normally hear about or think about. So, Chuck, I'm going to hand it over to you.
I was going to say, can I ask one quick question? How was it going to the dark side?
One quick question is going to turn out to be the whole time, but absolutely.
No. How was it transitioning from representing clients to going to the other side? Like a lollipop.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Closer.
so it's still not working?
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
It's this far away.
He says the lollipop.
Yeah.
Lollipop.
So, 36 years, tax lawyer based in Los Angeles. Then went on board to run the Internal Revenue Service for 5 years from 2018 to 2022. Grew up, born and raised in Los Angeles, moved to Washington, D.C. to run the Internal Revenue Service. By the numbers, Internal Revenue Service, when I got on board, had 83,000 employees. Annual budget was $14.1 billion. Our gross revenue, the commissioner's on a term, and my term ended in November 12th of 2022. And gross revenue for the 22 fiscal year was $4.9 trillion. So that's 83,000 people on a $14.1 billion budget, bringing in $4.9 trillion. And I was saying to somebody earlier, I said, I've been on panels with a lot of big boys who want to go, well, my entity did X billion dollars last year, 3 billion, 4 billion, pick a number, right? And I'll usually go, our budget was 14.1 billion and we did 4.9 trillion. Well, 4.9 trillion versus 4 billion, you're like, okay, it's a lot more zeros. But if you want to understand how that relates, that's 96% of the entire gross revenue of the United States of America. So the concept I used to use was the Internal Revenue Service is important. It's if you want, and it should be collecting tax from the people who owe tax. Otherwise, the people who pay the tax are actually paying for the people who are unidentified, non-compliant people. You don't need to raise the rates. The annual number, the estimate of the annual number, not including virtual currencies, is about $700 billion a year that the IRS is unable to collect. So if you got any appreciable percentage of that, obviously, you don't need to raise taxes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Known as the tax gap.
Exactly. And it's a nasty number. It's an estimate. I testified 37 times in front of the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee. I met more than 400 members of Congress one-on-one. And the best way to put this into context, I'm a public school kid out of Los Angeles, right? I went to NYU. I never lived in D.C. I'd been to D.C. And all of a sudden, you're put into this position. I was nominated by President Trump, went through the Senate Finance Committee, and then full Senate hearing to be confirmed. And I had 64 votes out of 100, which is more or less an all-time record for somebody. I mean, it's a very political environment. They don't even know who you are, but where you come from, right? I was also the first tax person to be commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Again, I've been tax lawyer, if you will, for 43 years. Other people thought the commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service or the Internal Revenue Service was really a large data processing organization or a large financial services organization. Trump 1 took a position that it's really a tax administration organization. So maybe we should have a tax guy come in and look at the organization. And again, my first 36 years in practice were against the Internal Revenue Service, Department of Justice, various state taxing authorities, did more criminal and civil tax work than about any other firm in the country when I went on board. Knew 5,000 or 6,000 IRS employees when I went on board from my work. Went on board and basically thanked the employees of the Internal Revenue Service. They put my children through college, and I was very appreciative of that. My daughter is a veterinarian. My son is a major in the United States Army who has deployed 3 times. And when I went on board, I'm giving you guys a picture, right? You know how the press is? The press is so off target, and the narrative statements so off target. When I went on board, the New York Times wrote an article, and the article said, Rettig does not even have an Ivy League education. Correct. I'm a public school kid out of LA. My father was born in Germany, came in the United States, went into the Navy for World War II. The only one in my family to go to college. Now, think about what we all see on President Trump and the narratives, right? And I'm not pro or anti-Trump. I'm not a political guy. But think about the narratives and then a tax litigator coming in to run the tax agency. Where they missed. Over 10% of the IRS employees are veterans. There's a veterans preference to come on board. Much higher percent are military families, such as myself. When I went on board, my son was deployed, fighting ISIS, getting attacked 3 to 5 times per week, living in a shipping container in North Camp Sinai, right? So I went on board and I said to the employees, hey, I'm proud military family, et cetera, et cetera. Second week, I got a standing ovation from IRS employees, 600 employees. If you're a military family and you have a member who's deployed or has deployed, you're part of that group. There's a thing with that. So this is how you connect from a leadership perspective when you've been against the people, how you connect with them. So that group, obviously, that's my guy. Number 2, 37% of IRS employees are first-generation immigrants, right? I am the first commissioner, son or daughter, active duty United States military. I was number 49. I'm the first commissioner to go to the Pentagon. I went twice to try to help young military members get in compliance all around the world. Number 3, 34 or 37% IRS employees are first-generation immigrants. My wife, for those of you my age or older, is a Vietnamese boat person. Born and raised in Vietnam. She escaped Vietnam on her 9th time, November 1981. 101 people, 27-foot boat, 9 days at sea, rescued at sea, 9 months in a refugee camp in Singapore. Now you go tell your 34 or 37% of your agency who are immigrants. By the way, my wife came into the country as a refugee, right? Also, what goes into the story, when Vietnam fell, April 30, 1975, they took her dad away. He did 3 years, 9 months in a VC jungle camp, lost his eye, lost his teeth, and got disabled. So now explain to me how that fits into a anti-Trump narrative of a guy who came in, who can't relate to the workforce, who can't relate to the people on the street, and he's going to shut down the country, if you will, through the Internal Revenue Service. It doesn't match, right? And I used to say, I learned a comment from my son being deployed. If you think you're all that, bring it. I think I might have used that with you earlier today. If you think you're all that, bring it. As commissioner, I traveled around the world representing the United States of America. I met with all types of people. And when you leave the country, you're no longer commissioner of the IRS. You're actually representative of the United States of America. I always went to the U.S. Embassy. I always went into the U.S. Marine barracks and basically gave hugs to these 18, 19-year-olds. Those are the guys who were doing it. Their job is 99% boredom and 1%, holy shit, what just happened here? They don't see it coming, but they're serving, and very proud to have had the opportunity to interact with them. More importantly, I interacted with 53 of my counterparts from throughout the world, right? I got counterintelligence training, which basically was stay away from the Russians and the Chinese. A lot of reasons for that, but I'll accelerate. I'll throw in some personal stories to, wake up some of you in some things. But I was in Santiago, Chile. I routinely had an 11-person protection detail. I'm 6'6". I'll tell you, I could see 300 pounds from where I'm sitting. My daughter would tell you, Dad, that's your goal, not your weight. I don't know if you have, my daughter's now a veterinarian, but when she was a teenager, she was brutal, right? 2 of my guys on my protection detail were 6'8", 360 pounds, wearing suits, multiple handguns, automatic weapons on a sling behind them. We flew commercial, but fully armed, right? It's a big deal. When you're official in the United States, you go out of the country, it's a big deal. I went through counter intelligence training, which included counter kidnapping training, which means the 4th stage, you're in a Saddam Hussein spider hole. and we wish you luck. We'll take care of your family. That really is the end result of the training. Santiago, Chile, 2.5 day of meetings. The last day, one of my guys comes up and he says, "Sir, the Russians would like to introduce themselves." My training was, don't interact with the Russians or the Chinese. They will use it against us. Don't get your picture taken. They will use it against us. Again, public school kid out of LA, right? Do you want to go out of the country and cause maybe an international incident? And also, let me segue, and y'all know, the allegations that the Trump administration was, a tool of Russia. Park that for a second. So I looked to my guy and I said, we have an hour and a half and we're out of here. Like, I could see the finish line of not having, if you will, my picture and whatever with the Chinese and the Russians. And this one guy says, "Sir, I'll be with you." I said, "Okay, this is going to be quick." And I was, if you will, on alert. You would be on alert too. I'm no different than any one of you, but put yourself in this. So I go up to these two guys. First guy says, "My name is Mikhail. I went to the University of Wisconsin." Pleasure. Next guy, "My name is Alexei. I went to University of Minnesota." Pleasure. Mikhail comes back and says, "We would like to collaborate." That's the last thing I heard. Big Mike, one of my guys, grabs my shoulder. I'm telling you, he pulled me off my feet, right? And the other guy cuts in. He goes, "That's not happening." Okay, that's a good story. Fast forward 12 to 14 months from that day. If you recall, when Putin terminated, I get them mixed up, whether it was the president or the terminated, not like Putin might be able to terminate, but relieve the guy of his duties, right? Who was either the prime minister or the president, right? Putin had the other role because he alternated. Mikhail became the president of Russia. Imagine a picture of the IRS commissioner nominated by Trump with the president of Russia. It wouldn't say this was 2 years ago when this guy was head of the Russian Federation of Tax. And now every one of us would think, well, Russian collusion is a real thing. And I lived in Washington, D.C. That's an experience all by itself to tie in. One of the reasons, and we talked, that I wanted to come out is to paint really what I would consider an accurate picture. I don't have a dog in this fight. An accurate picture of the Internal Revenue Service, and in particular, the abilities of the Internal Revenue Service. What can it do? What can't it do? When I was on board, I already said 83 to 87,000 employees. January of this year, they got up to 102,000 employees. Across the federal sector, there have been mass layoffs, voluntary and otherwise, mass budget cuts. So they've just cut $2.5 billion from the annual budget. When I was on board, one of my roles was to get called supplemental funding, 10-year money to rebuild the agency, modernize it. That's technology, taxpayer service, operations, and enforcement, compliance. We got $80 billion August 16, 2022. People at Treasury would tell you they never would have got it without me. I was relentless on getting it. Being from LA, branding is important, right? I did what every other commissioner before me did, which was go up and beg for money. It didn't work for anybody else. Why would I think it works for me? But the difference was I had a kid in the military, right? My son wears the flag on his shoulder. The military goes up there and Congress says, we're going to give you another $20 million or $2 billion. We want another aircraft carrier. They go, well, we got 11 aircraft carriers. There's 7 oceans. We're tied up alongside each other in, whatever sea. We can't use it. I go up for $5 million. We don't think you're efficient enough. So how did we flip it? 96% of gross revenue of this country. Mr. Senator, or Miss Senator, or Congressperson, you're really important. We appreciate your importance. But you realize every time the United States doesn't build bridges, it doesn't build aircraft carriers, they contract that out. So 96% of all the money that goes into those activities, whatever Congress decides, IRS doesn't decide, they're just administrative agency. 96% of that, I used to say, thank an IRS employee, right? You want the IRS to be efficient. You want every federal agency to be efficient, but I'm biased on the IRS. And I'm an equal opportunity abuser. Are there inefficiencies inside the IRS? 87,000 employees? Of course there are. 54,000 of those employees are unionized, right? So there's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through to move around. But it's important. It's the fact that IRS is important. We switched everything we did, slide decks, progress reports, red, white, and blue. Some semblance of stars and stripes. Not just a picture of the flag, if you will, but things waving, blue and red stripes, stars, in places. More like you would see come out of maybe Hollywood than you would see come out of DC. They said to me, I went into a room one day, they had all these diagrams up. It's a very command-oriented operation, very military type. And all these things up, and it was like, sir, which one of these do you like? I'm a tax lawyer. You guys decide, right? I'll go with what you guys decide. Little did I know, that was one of my better moves, that I gave the creative people the discretion. They were floored. That's not how it works. Normally, if you will, the general comes in and says, well, what do I know about that stuff, right? Mix it up. Let's just do what we do. Fast forward. Compliance. And one of the reasons I'm really very happy with Michael and Joyce for inviting me out here. What do you need to be concerned about in the virtual currency space? Do you need to be concerned in the virtual currency space? Let me tell you, the cost of compliance, I've represented more named people, business-wise, headed to prison, who family breaks up, they lose the business, and there's nothing but tears. They would have paid 5 times the tax that was at issue to not have met me, right? I said earlier, I go, I'm the guy, I could go into a room and know 200 people. Not one knows me. It's like they put me in the room with the proctologist because nobody knows the proctologist either, although they all know the proctologist, right? Somebody who does the type of tax work I do is not necessarily going to be the most popular guy in the room. Compliance. The cost of complying is minimal compared to poking the bear and the bear finds you. Well, virtual currencies, if you go back, right, the anonymous nature of virtual currencies, that was kind of a pitch initially. Let me, if there's nothing else you remember, you're going to remember the next 2 minutes. One of the reasons I had an 11-person full-time protection detail, just while I was on board, 2018 to 2022, we took down IRS Cybercrimes Unit. IRS Cybercrimes Unit in December 2018 took down the largest child exploitation site in the world based... Is he talking to us?
No.
That's for them.
This is the 2 minutes that we all want to hear. Come on.
Took down the largest child exploitation site in the world, based in South Korea. 337 arrests for 38 countries. Rescued 23 actively exploited children, 6 of whom were located in the United States. That was an entirely IRS project. Dark web virtual currency, right? Entirely IRS project. We also took down financing sites in the dark web for Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS in the dark web. We actually got court approval to seize those sites. It's illegal for a U.S. person to make a contribution to a designated terrorist organization. We seized those sites and we operated those sites for 90 days. My kind of half joke, when you're on the inside, it was funny. It might be less funny now, but my kind of half joke was when we went live, right? And one day it went up and it said property of government of United States of America, front and center, IRS Special Agents badge. So that was an underwear changing day for the guy who the last Thursday of the month donated his $25 to Hamas, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS. Some of those are the reasons why you have an 11-person protection detail. Very active in disrupting, but Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS on a terrorist financing site has every reason in the world to be as anonymous as you could be, right? And they have campuses designed to stay off our radar screen. We also did the largest financial seizure in the history of the world. $3.6 billion seized a wallet out of the cloud. $3.6 billion associated with the BitFinance hack from 2015. We did that in 2022. That's to tell you it's relentless. These folks are out there all the time. Last year, after I left, they, we call it disrupted, the largest international fentanyl distribution network operating in the dark web, Sinaloa cartel, and located it and created all kinds of havoc for those guys, right? So we think IRS as examination, collection, pain in the ass. I'm here to tell you, one, there is a reason to be proud about IRS folks. Generally, most people are proud. We have a military. I always go, why do we have 11 aircraft carriers? So we don't have to use them, right? If you had one or none, you might have some pretty active, destroyers or smaller ships, but sort of that impression of power. I felt that impression of power when I traveled around the world. Inside, we talked about, I was big on the description of having power and using power. The IRS interacts with more Americans than any other private or public sector organization, but it doesn't need to stomp the grounds and destroy everywhere it goes. It doesn't need to make a case out of everything that's there. Some people are that ignorant, if you will, are not aware of it. But coming back, virtual currencies and the statement on the return.
The virtual currency question.
So on a 1040, there's a question. You have any interest, I'm paraphrasing, any interest whatsoever in a virtual currency related transaction? It's a little more detailed than that.
It's like the virtual currency version of the foreign bank account question.
All right. Schedule B, line 7B, ask you, did you have any interest in a foreign financial account, beneficial or otherwise? I got on board in October 2018. In early 2019, I said, hey, I got a question. Why don't we ask that same question in the virtual currency space? Everybody looked at me. We'll get back to you. People came in with a really elaborate mechanism for reporting. And I said, why don't we just have a yes-no question parroting this foreign financial account question? And these two very senior guys look at each other and go, yeah, we could do that, right? They go away, come back in a week. Okay, we cannot do it on the 2019 return. This was probably in like March of 2019. We cannot put it in the 2019 Form 1040 because IT is already in motion, have really already prepared the 1040 for 2019, right? Returns are done many years before. Audit plans are done many years before. So we can't put it in 2019. Why? We'll have the CIO come in and talk to you. Fine. Logical question. Why can't we do this? You do know that they call it the turf. Putting it and or the in that return is like shuts down the agency for 30 days, right? And here I want a whole sentence with a yes-no box. So the IT people come in. This is behind the curtains. I've known every commissioner, but no commissioner ever came out and said, let me tell you what it's like to be the wizard behind the screen. And so that's kind of also why I appreciate coming out. Why can't we? The CIO, the deputy CIO come in. Why can't we put this in the return? Right? Public school kid, I don't know anything about IT. Well, we could put it in the return, sir, but we will not be able to electronically scrape it. You realize that there's filters. Everything goes through an electronic mode. I know you really want to know what are those filters? What are the triggers, right? That's a whole different thing. That's a different discussion. But we cannot electronically scrape that yes-no question. It's too late in the year. So what did I say? How many people know that? The CIO, the deputy CIO, David and me. 4 of us. In the whole universe, 4 of us know we can't actually use that unless we already have the taxpayer under examination and an agent sees it and sees a yes, no, and asks the question. I go, so I want it in there. Deterrence, right? The idea that
It's always the cheapest cost, deterrence.
it's free. So it went first. This is giving you a heads up of how the government works. It went on Schedule 1, right? Which is an other income schedule. It's a schedule attached to the return. Do you know where it is now? If you were to print out a return, name and address, it's the first question right underneath there. What that tells you when you look at a return, what is the government looking at? Watch as they move things around. That's the relative importance of where they're going, right? So I'm coming back to saying compliance is important. You don't have to be perfect on your return, but on a yes-no question, if you have activity in that space and you have answered no,
Yeah. What are the consequences?
That's criminal tax fraud. It's a yes/no question. You don't need a tax lawyer. You don't need a tax lawyer to say, did you have an interest in a foreign financial account, right? If it's not a domestic account, it's a foreign financial account. A lot of people go and hire teams of really sophisticated lawyers well, it's a life insurance funded product, da-da-da-da-da. They pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, get a 50-page opinion that it's not substantially similar to what the IRS is asking you. You know what I'd tell you? I would answer yes and save that money, right? Yes, with why it's not taxable is not a crime. No is a crime without respect to whether or not it's taxable. This is public school stuff. The world's not as complex as, if you will, the tax lawyers in the world make it out to be.
So it's like what you're saying is, yes, there's no downside. No, it's all downside.
Exactly. You can't, what we say in the criminal tax side, we can't explain a lie. Yes, no. Did you have an interest in a foreign financial account? Did you have an interest? The IRS terminology now is digital assets, because when the IRS came out and what is or isn't taxable in the virtual currency space, they got it wrong. Look at the 2014 revenue ruling. They got it wrong. They had the wrong terminology. There are two people inside IRS when I got on board who knew anything about virtual currencies, let alone the taxability of them. But one of those guys is a key player in IRS criminal investigation. That should tell you something as well. IRS will tell you, it's on their website, the government version of non-compliance in the virtual currency space is 75%. 75% of the people who have an interest in some type of virtual currency are not reporting it on the return, which is why the troops are going there. The same agency that's going after Hamas and Al-Qaeda has the troops and the civil side. And when the civil people become aware of what's called a firm indication of fraud, they throw it over the fence. The criminal people take a look. That's the whole process. How does the IRS make its numbers? It's pretty simple. The boss is here, so I should sit up, right? It's pretty simple. How does the IRS figure out to go into this space? So John Doe summons. The IRS is not allowed to do a fishing expedition. They cannot just globally issue subpoenas for all of your accounts, whether they're at a foreign exchange or whether it's at Wells Fargo. They have to have a reason. You have to know you have an account. But in the John Doe space, what they do is they go to court. So IRS can issue a summons. If I know you have a bank account at Wells Fargo, I can go to Wells Fargo, give them Jasmine's name, and I want all of her accounts because I know she has an account. If I think a large percentage of you have an account at an exchange, I have to go to court. It's called a John Doe summons. And a revenue agent submits an affidavit and says, we have a reasonably identifiable class, and for all these reasons, this is all private stuff. It's not public at the time it goes into the court. For all these reasons, we believe that folks in this class have an interest in an account. One of the first ones that went public was Coinbase, right? Coinbase, the limitations IRS asked for, they got court approval, federal district court approval, asked for account holders at Coinbase who had some indicia of U.S. ownership, but had more than 200 transactions and more than $200,000 in the account during the course of this 12-month period. So essentially not the 8-year-old kid who just bought some Bitcoin, if you will, in the government speak, players. People were more serious in the activity. The court approved that. They came back, Coinbase came back, and we got 11,000 information on 11,000 account holders, right? Some indicia of U.S. ownership, 200 and 200. Out of the 11,000, what does IRS do? It pushes it through the system. Remind me to talk about technology. Pushes it through, please. Pushes it through the system. Anybody want to guess, out of 11,000, how many tax returns had some indicia of a virtual currency transaction on it? 50. 50. 50 out of 11,000. That's poking the bear. That's the bear being told, okay, this isn't working. At the time,
It's also the question. It says, do you have an interest in a, you didn't ask
That
that in
wasn't on there.
English.
That wasn't on there then.
Oh, okay.
Oh, now we ask the question in English and Spanish. We, proverbial we.
I don't, I mean,
Years.
English, not legal English, not legalese.
Single syllable words. That's my whole thing. You know, my wife from Vietnam, and which talks to her family, right, is like an entirely different person. I'm in awe of people who can speak multiple languages, but the family joke is 20-minute conversation in Vietnamese. I'll hear the word Chuck 5 times, and I'll say, so what did they say? Oh, my parents didn't say anything about you. That's when you really wish. I wish I knew it. I know Cam Un and Pho Ga. I'll Google. Longer story, but remind me out of this. So all the IRS was looking for was some indicia of ownership. And of the 11,000, only 50. It obviously opened up a lot of examinations. I mean, why randomly audit groups, which is, by the way, where the IRS is going now, right? They don't have the resources to, if you will, audit every 7th taxpayer. It's not going to happen. So with limited resources and technology, you do specific item audits, right? And you try to identify a class and go into that class and ask specific issues. Then you're not going to see a comprehensive audit of somebody in the next 3 to 5 years. This is not going to happen.
So the thing we were talking about earlier too is, I think it'll be important to point out is the crossing the line and then going from civil to criminal liability. And actually what I thought was a low threshold about, and maybe also
$50,000.
Yeah. And then also maybe talk about the badges of fraud, which I think is
$60,000 of what's called tax loss, which is federal and state, in 6 years. There's a 6-year criminal statute. So if actually you have a problem in your return of an intentional nature, and it's more than 6 years old, it's a civil case for the IRS, and they'll look at a civil fraud penalty. They might, which is 75% of the tax. If you're in 6 years from the filing date of the return that's 6 years older, all of those are in play. You'll see people get indicted, and you'll see they got indicted on 2022 and 2023, right? And it'll talk in terms of tax loss of X. And then you'll see the sentencing. And for sentencing, the tax loss is much greater. What's called relevant conduct. So it can be unindicted conduct for years not in the indictment, come into play for the sentencing. This comes back to, one, if you get an audit notice, let me just tell you, every criminal lawyer, and certainly every criminal tax lawyer will tell you, if it's 7 a.m. on a Thursday, you got to knock on the door, and 2 very well-dressed people, they will show their badge, say, we're from the Internal Revenue Service, we'd like to talk to you. Probably a third of the people invite them in. Oh, come on in, and that's where the lies happen. And that's what creates really the criminal case. It's not a mistake when you overtly lie to an agent. By the way, 1001, that's a whole separate crime, right? Why do they travel in 2s? One asks questions, one is the witness for when they're going to prosecute. IRS doesn't prosecute, it investigates and throws it over to DOJ. I don't think it'll happen to any of you, but let me just tell your friends, if anybody in the government ever knocks on your door, take their card, tell them you'll have your lawyer, get in touch with them. They fully expect that, right? Where they're caught off guard is when people invite them in, have a cup of coffee, you want a croissant, you want a coffee cake or whatever, and they try to explain the unexplainable. They didn't just show up because you're the 7th house in the block and it's Thursday at 7 a.m. Their casework has gone on for maybe 6 to 9 months before they surface, right? They've got information. They're super friendly people. You were like, how can they? They carry guns, they carry badges. They are trained to be friendly, right? They're trained to basically bring down the barriers for very serious situations. So I don't want to harbor on the criminal stuff, but it's out there. Every year, the government does about 1,000, IRS does 1,000 criminal cases that go to the Department of Justice. And the ones that really get prosecuted are just the simple ones. Yes, no question. We had X dollars in the account. While I was on board, there's a civil process. If I have no money and I owe the IRS $1 million, I can do an offer and compromise and say, listen, if you poured me upside down and the most you can get out of me in the next 5 years is $100,000, I'll borrow money from, my friends and give you $100,000 and you go away. And they go, okay, we'll do that. That's a process. We had one of those. We located a virtual currency account for this person of $16 million. That's the difference between a civil and a criminal case, right? Don't poke the bear. That's really, I can tell you after, and I don't know where we are time-wise, but I can tell you after 43 years, do not poke the bear. The bear, IRS went from 102,000 employees. With the cutbacks, they're going to end up somewhere between 55 and 65,000 employees. They went from $14.1 billion annual budget. They're going to go down to somewhere, 11 or $12 billion. The $46 billion for enforcement has been taken away, right? So you might celebrate, go, well, this is great. I'm going to tell you the technology, we got $3.5 billion in COVID. We bought technology. Technology leverages scarce human resources. A common sense thing that you'll remember, on the phones, IRS has 15,000 people that answer 40 to 42 million phone calls a year. When I got on board, if Jasmine's the taxpayer and I'm the IRS and I answer the phone, it's one-on-one. By the time I left in 2022, with chatbots, voice bots, and a whole host of other things, automation, I, as an IRS employee, can handle 4 inbound calls. Now my 15,000 people is 60,000 people. Last year, I, as an IRS person, could handle 8 inbound calls. I had a presentation, criminal investigation, with Secretary Mnuchin. Mnuchin, by the way, one of the most brilliant people I've ever interacted with. Every Thursday at 3:30, I had 2 hours with Secretary Mnuchin, talk about anything I wanted to talk about. The rule of the game was no surprises. Make sure he totally hands off on us, but make sure he knows everything I know. As he said, he shouldn't be up on the hill and some congressperson, senator, whatever, says, hey, I hear you guys had a train wreck, right? He goes, we're going to have a train wreck. You can't have this type of an operation. But he goes, just make sure I know. It's criminal investigation, presentation, Secretary Mnuchin, IRS special agent. This was a Palantir product. You want to know what the software is the IRS has? Look at their pay scale. It's all public. What the IRS pays for, it's all public. Maybe not the specifics, and a lot comes in and then it's tweaked. But on this one, special agent is talking to us across the table and she's doing some keystrokes, and then she goes, boo. And she says, that used to be 3 weeks of special agent time to develop that. You saw it took me 45 seconds, right? Again, technology leveraging resources. So you're not seeing me say, IRS needs 102,000 people. 102,000 people in and of itself creates problems, right? But you need the right people. You need the sophisticated people. If you know any tax accountants, tax lawyers, they're going to tell you they all day long would rather have an experienced person across the table than an inexperienced person who's been trained. And when they get trained on fraud, the revenue agents, they're trained by criminal agents, right? So they're up at a whiteboard and they go like this, and you see the just out of college person sees the badge and the gun. They come out of those programs, they see fraud everywhere. They don't see mistakes. They don't see, I really wasn't thinking, I've used 1,000 times with the government. When my daughter was 7, one time I said, honey, what were you thinking? Like she did something. She goes, Dad, I wasn't thinking. Put me on my heels, right? I get it. You're not specialists in this world, but some of the stuff is really simple. That yes, no question, they don't go after the yeses. They go after the no's, right? Answering a question, yes, and it should have been no, you're okay. Answering it no, and you've got to come up with a legal opinion, technical argument why it's no as opposed to yes, you're going to be best friends with your tax lawyer. You should never be best friends with your tax lawyer. That shouldn't happen. The tax return, it's not an offer to negotiate with the government. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's substantial compliance. Get in the arena on accuracy, and from there, everything can be talked about. The vast majority of cases get resolved early. Examination, and there's the right to an administrative appeal, and then court. In the middle, if it goes astray, you might meet a criminal agent, and that's all bets are off. It's a regular criminal case, very difficult. You go through the criminal process, and then you come back. Which cases do they look for? They look for cases where they can get jail time, prison time. $60,000 will get you a year and a day. Why it's a year and a day? by the way, if you ever got in that situation and you got a year, you want to ask the judge, I need an extra day. If you got a year in federal system, you have to serve a year. If you get a year and a day, you serve 85%. It's important. That day is really critical. And it's all based on tax laws. How much time you're going to do is how much the tax number was. It's math.
Simple takeaway. Don't poke the bear.
1,000%.
Just one other final question I can think of for you.
We
That'd be
must have
great.
gone way
We
over.
we are so far over time, and I am so engrossed in this
I
conversation.
apologize to all of you.
Like-
I told him one of his roles cut me off. I get passionate. I don't like to see people get in the trenches and really become my best friend. I see the families break up. I see the businesses break up, and they didn't have to. Is there an explanation? We've been pretty successful explaining anything except for a lie. That's why I start out with you guys on that yes, no. Also, and maybe to close this part, I guess, pay attention. Pay attention to how things move in a tax return. Pay attention to press releases of the government. When I was on board, and I think it'll continue, very transparent on where we're going. And the rule was, if you hear I'm coming in this direction, you should talk to somebody, not whoever got you into that situation, a fresh set of eyes, right? Somebody who's unrelated to that, fresh set of eyes, competent, but a fresh set of eyes. And that person will either tell you, yeah, you have an issue, or no, you're good, right? If you have an issue, you amend that return because they're coming. Automation, they can electronically scrape, they can create problems. They're coming. If they come and you amend the returns, fine. Thank you very much. Goodbye. We publicly used to say we didn't care how many amended returns we ran into, but the people who are willing to poke the bear, bring it. So I'll end with, while I was at the government, if I can have two quick stories, one's more funny, but while I was at the government, we had a group of lawyers come in. I knew every one of them. And they said, we have $200 million set aside to fight you guys on this issue for legal fees. $200 million. So basically they said, you guys don't have the resources. What was our answer? I'm part of a company that has 11 aircraft carriers in SEAL Team 6. My agency has the tax equivalent of that. I have 3,300 lawyers in-house. You guys are going to meet every one of those lawyers, right? Explain to your clients why they had to spend $200 million because you came in holier than thou thinking you could play that card with us. I said, F you guys. And then I went out publicly speaking. People came in telling us how big and brave they are. And I go, if you're all that, why don't we just go, let's do it now. We're ready. I want to do it while I'm here. Number two, a close. My wife's a tax accountant. Right? This is a funny personal story. My wife's a tax accountant. I went out of the country April 6, 2019. I went through this kidnapping training. I came home with a sheet of paper from State Department, and it's when she gets the call from the kidnappers, it's instructions for what my wife is supposed to do. When? And remember, I'm traveling. We had State Department people, we had embassy people, we had 23 of my guys, right? And then we had for the Chilean state police. And it's answer the phone and then say this, and this, and then call this lady at the State Department and they'll take it over. Again, my wife loves me to death. She's not here, but Jasmine knows her. And, maybe next time we'll bring her out. I'll tell the story and you go, man, this lady is tough. So I give it to her. You know what she said? Honey, April 6th, it's tax season. I'm busy. You and your friends, I wasn't the one that got nominated to be commissioner. I'm not going out of the country. I'm doing my tax stuff. It's tax season and I'm busy. And I said, listen, it's really easy. You just have to say this and then make this call. Number two, she said, and this is the last part, I don't answer my phone if I don't know the number. I said, I'm red-eyeing out of the country Sunday. I'll be back Wednesday afternoon. And I go, well, what about the guys? You love the guys, right? Even to help the guys, can you just answer the phone? And she leaves it with, you tell your kidnappers to call my military son. He knows how to handle that. I go, can you make sure he has this sheet, areas you don't want to screw up? I'm proud to be a tax guy. I'm super proud to be an American, if you will. Couldn't be more proud of the things that I did. Does the IRS make mistakes? Does it overstep? Of course it does. It's a large agency. You've got to get on this ahead of schedule. You can interact ahead of schedule. And the one thing I'll tell you is if you have a civil case now, have your people take a look. There are real opportunities because of resource challenges to resolve cases quickly that would not have happened a year ago when the agency has its resources. So you can go in with, don't go for the gusto, right? Don't go to shut. They're not going to walk, if there's smoke, they're not going to walk away with nothing. But figure out what you're willing to live with. What I've always found out from clients in my mindset was certainty is better than uncertainty. Closing down a civil case, it doesn't get better. And being able to go and do your business, now you know what you owed them, right? You might not agree with it, but by the time you add in the frustration factor, the personal family factor,
Closure.
and what it
Closure.
costs with lawyers, accountants, maybe economists, valuation experts, honestly, all that money should pay them and get rid of them. You know what I mean? Thank you all for
Thanks,
the
Chuck.
ramble.
Appreciate it. Great insight. Great stories.
Innovate, bringing assets to the digital state. From finance to games, we're redefining, connecting the dots. The future is shining.